Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendees that are switching into this presentation. My name's Doug Witschi. I'm the Assistant Director for Cybercrime Threat Response here at Interpol in Singapore. Singapore is a lovely blue sky day today for those that aren't in this region. And I'm going to talk today about establishing a new capability in crisis. And I guess I'm going to talk about some of the future capabilities and some of the foresight aspects that we're working through at the moment as we establish the capability, and obviously some of the challenges that we're forecasting for the future and how we might position ourselves to best provide the service and capabilities we need to the communities around the world. I have a presentation here. I'm not going to kill you by PowerPoint, but I'm just going to show a couple of slides and then I'll open up for questions at the conclusion of the meeting. I guess the focus of the presentation is really going to be around the drivers for change, and it stages through a range of different times and thought processes. The opportunities that are presented to me personally, I'll talk about, then we'll talk about the challenges around the crisis, which we're all facing at the moment. And I don't think they're unique in relation to some of those challenges, but I guess from an organisational perspective, we have added challenges as an international global organisation, how we maintain, I guess, the pace, the service, whilst we're dealing with the human resource issues around the impact on our people. Then I'm going to talk about the changing environment, and this is really when we start to think about what the impact the coronavirus specifically and the crisis has had on my service and my service deliverables and the team that I look after. And then we're going to talk about briefly around the futures and some of the challenges that await us and what we can do to preempt and predict and plan for those various contingencies. And we'll work through a couple of the thought processes that I've used around future tools. I guess for the purpose of context, my background, a long-term law enforcement officer. My previous role in Interpol was running the strategic innovation capability. Part of that strategic capability was we had a futures and foresight team that was really looking at horizon scans and over the horizon type of issues. It's interesting, the pandemic was something that was flagged but wasn't seriously considered in the middle of last year. Obviously, we're dealing with that issue now quite critically. So from here, I guess a bit of background about Interpol. Interpol's a international organisation made up of 194 member countries, primarily the chiefs of police across the national police agencies around the world. We have a very vast and complex network of information systems. Interpol's primarily an information data sharing capability. Our job is to sort of try to get national agencies to collaborate and work through challenges and issues as a collective. We're a neutral organisation. We don't let politics play through our decision making or our decision processes. So what we need to do is obviously try to sort of balance, I guess, the varied natures, requirements and needs of member countries and provide a service to them primarily to protect and make their communities safe. So the Cybercrime Directorate at Interpol is primarily focused on reducing the impact of cybercrime and protecting the communities for a safer world. Last year, it was evident as the emergence and capabilities. I'll just go to the next slide quickly. This was the strategic position, I guess, and the capabilities that were provided by the Cybercrime Directorate last year. An investigation and intelligence support capability, obviously the strategy that sits under the development of that capability and the service it delivers, the strategic outreach and how we actually build partnerships and relationships, and also developing capability development across 194 member countries. Of course, people and countries are in various stages of development of their capabilities and services, and we have to sort of balance our service delivery to meet the varied natures of the various countries. Something works quite well in one country may not work in another, and we need to tailor those services and bring people up to a level to be able to ensure that protections and safeties and security processes are adequate across all member countries. Because in the cyber space, a vulnerability in one country presents a vulnerability to all. So we're really working through a range of different challenges. So this was our picture in the middle of early last year, in the middle of last year. It was identified that one capability we didn't have was this cyber threat response, what we call cyber threat response capability. A group that can quickly triage threat, try to put mitigation and disruption strategies in place in relation to the cyber threat, and obviously try to make some changes to that environment in partnership with the member countries. But also key to the capability of this service was the partnerships that have been established with private-public partners. We're very fortunate in Interpol to have 13 gateway partners initially as part of the pilot. That's just been ratified by General Assembly last year. And through these private-public partners, we work through the challenges of cybercrime and the information that we get, and we can supplement that information with the vast quality of some of our specialist capabilities and our private partners to actually help attribute activity and then work with member countries to try to disrupt that activity. So we're a new capability. We actually launched, our official launch is actually this month, but we actually started operations as a cyber threat response capability in January this year. So I inherited this lovely capability facility, the Cyber Fusion Centre, which is based in Singapore. Got a lot of capability that sits behind the desks. We've got be able to run an operations centre in some respects if we need to. We generally don't, but I've inherited quite a very functional and robust intelligence team that have been doing quite a bit of work and have developed quite a good skill and capability set high-end analysis and triaging activities and actually working through processes with private partners. Currently, we have 4 private partners embedded into that facility, which adds obviously a richer context and understanding and awareness. So quite pleased to do this. But what we need to do was change from a purely responsive capability to one that was really quite proactive and move through those processes. So it wasn't long after taking up the role in January that obviously the coronavirus started to impact on our business. I mean, the issues for us internally, like everywhere else, it was how to keep our people safe, but still try to balance the safety with the delivery of a service. And as a new capability that we're sort of trying to develop and expand on what the intelligence piece had been provided previously. Our real focus was obviously trying to improve our service delivery to member countries. The issue was, we moved into segregated teams quite quickly. The organisation, Interpol, was quite quick to identify risks and come up with strategies about how we can work with our staff in a way that can still maintain a service delivery level, but also keep levels of staging and process in place. And that segregation process ran for a couple of weeks before we actually were moved, unfortunately, to home and everyone was taken off site. It presented some challenges for us. A lot of our high-end capability in the cyberspace sits within our office and doing a lot of the work that we were trying to do through remotely and through laptops and the like presented some real challenges. But our information services division took up that challenge and we're now starting to roll out high-end equipment to our people at home that provides them additional capability, but not the full capability. We're also looking at recall capabilities for critical issues so we can actually come back to the office and work through challenges as long as we maintain the requirements of social distancing. And also it's based primarily on a risk model. So we had these challenges about working from home and obviously video conferencing has become a thing that's almost second nature to a lot of people in the team now. And trying to challenge those peoples and thinks about what we need to do and how we need to deliver our service when that face-to-face contact and that collaborative team environment has dispersed across Singapore primarily for us. And now too, with a lot of our private partners, has gone globally. So it was interesting because at the same time externally, we were starting to see people exploit and take advantage of the coronavirus situation. There were spikes in cybercrime activities across the world. We saw an increase in the use of ransomware being targeted at things like hospitals and other critical capabilities. We identified attacks against other international organisations that are involved in providing support, welfare and services around the coronavirus issues. And we saw increases in scams, malware and phishing activities across various groups. And we started to report on those types of issues, and we started to generate what we call a request for information with our private public partners around the risks and threats that we were starting to identify. And quite quickly, we were able to attribute and work through a number of activities with member countries and start to show that we're a lot more responsive and a lot more proactive, I guess, in our methods of responding and trying to tackle that threat process, which is fantastic. I think the other issue too, what quickly came apart was we were very much dependent on a range of different critical risks. One obviously is losing staff to the virus or family members of staff. So obviously trying to keep our staff healthy and capable and available was obviously key. The other thing too is we found that as we move from a reactive to a proactive service delivery, a lot of our staff had to work through, we needed additional staff actually to do the workload and actually start to transition from a reactive process to a proactive process and introduce new services and information capabilities that we could provide to the 194 member countries. So we're working through this type of issue. And it's ongoing. It's very much a daily basis. People are working quite extensively long hours at times. What we're trying to do is try to manage a work-life balance, which is always challenging from remotely. And I guess from a futures perspective, predicting the impact of a pandemic of this nature and how would it actually impact on business communities and societies, I think was very challenging, to contemplate the fact that for the first time globally, the planet's primarily starting to shut down from a services and capabilities perspective. World Trade Organization's talking about a global depression. Others are definitely talking about recessions, and people are starting to look inwardly from a national perspective and think about how they can keep their specific societies going. And for an international organisation that is very much dependent on foreign aid and funding to operate, it presents new challenges for us. And I'll talk about some of those issues shortly. Anyway, so we moved forward and we started to get some traction, and we started to identify some significant threats that have been in the media of late around some of the threats against hospitals as one aspect, but other services. We're providing a lot more products, and our focus really from a strategic perspective is to be relevant and capable and necessary for the cybercrime fight. And this is something that's a longer term strategy and need for us. It's about thinking about what we need to do to be relevant into the future. And if the environment changes so significantly, we're going to be sort of struggling to be able to be viable in an environment that I guess needs the service, but not necessarily thinks it's a necessary service. And try to focus on how we actually position ourselves in such a way that we can add value and be seen to be add value, then the likelihood of investment is higher for us into the longer term. So looking forward, I think the challenge for us, and I guess for myself and my team, is sometimes you have to look behind and look back in history to actually understand what might happen into the future. And whether you do a forecasting or you work through a range of different hypothetical situations and scenario planning, we do quite a bit of that in relation to the services and structures that we're trying to achieve through coronavirus 19, but how we actually come out at the tail end of that coronavirus. And we're thinking at short, medium and long terms. Our short terms are obviously dealing with the crisis at hand at the moment. A medium terms in that 2 to 3 years post, and a longer terms in that 5 to 10 year era at the moment. And we're looking at the challenges around the funding opportunities for capabilities such as ourselves. We promote ourselves as a global capability. We promote ourselves as organisations not bound by jurisdiction and national borders. But also we need to be seen to be providing service to those national agencies and brokering arrangements, connections and capabilities to be seen to be viable and worth investing in. So for an international organisation that's dependent on foreign aid, one of the big challenges as the financial systems of the global financial systems start to slow down, and we'd look at a possible recession, maybe depression, is how do we be capable, relevant, and needed in a future space. And that's part of the work we're working through in relation to our strategic planning, positioning capabilities. So we're trying to anticipate the probable, but we're trying to innovate for the possible and looking at how we actually structure and service the capabilities of the 194 and also, I guess, the broader communities that we serve throughout that process. So this for us is not an easy task. It's quite a dynamic and challenging environment at the moment. We've got a lot of smart people working through this from a broader strategic level, not to mention at the micro level that I'm dealing with in relation to a specific capability. But collectively, we're trying to position our roles and functions for the future, thinking about what's happened in the past, how we actually tailor that service and capabilities, and where we need to take ourselves down that path in the longer term. Listen, I mean, I guess that's primarily the key message I want to flag through this presentation. I'm quite comfortable in taking questions, and I think there might be a few. For us, it's a work in progress. Our capabilities are an emerging one. We're trying to really get some runs on the board and trying to position ourselves as an enabler for a range of different issues around the cybercrime threat. The cybercrime threat now is costing, billions, if not trillions of dollars in relation to damage and costs to the communities globally. It's quite prevalent at the moment because of the environment, but also I guess there is concerns and issues, I guess, from the communities in relation to its impacting now, whether it's scams in relation to the masks or other services, or or links for this desire for information around the world, and they embed phishing links that grab banking details that obviously they can use and exploit later. We need to put a stop and try to disrupt this as much as we can. And we need to position ourselves in such a way that can deliver those types of outcomes as best as we can. So I guess that's about it for me. Is there any questions that anyone has at this time? Good question. The question was, what would be the key challenges, capacity and capabilities for members? Are they general COVID specific? I think, look, the immediate challenges around COVID are challenging. I think actually the challenges are going to lie beyond COVID and post-COVID. I think a lot of the national countries around the world are investing a lot of money into their communities to obviously maintain their financial positions and services. I think what will lead to that, and looking backwards when we did our forecasting processes and understanding what the impacts financially might be, is that generally out of 2008 financial crisis, countries obviously spent significantly to maintain an economy and process. And as a result, a lot of countries took about 5 to 6 years to actually start to recover and get back to their pre-event financial position. For all international organisations that are very much dependent on foreign aid, I think the challenge will be that that's going to sort of reduce over time. It's obviously a significant risk to international organisations in that reduction. An organisation that's funded by member countries, both in resourcing and obviously core funding to operate, there might be reductions and pressures put around those organisations there. So I guess it's important for the international organisations to obviously maintain service delivery and be seen to be delivering those services. And I think the post COVID-19 is probably going to present bigger challenges for agencies such as Interpol. Can you share more about the specific foresight methods you're using? Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot of foresight methods that I personally use. I've got a background in doing some foresight and strategic foresight from my past lives. I think for us, we generally look at, we can use scenario training and look at different types of scenarios. We can work through those tools to actually develop strategies, and then we can evaluate and assess each of those strategies and apply those strategies. Some contingency planning is always good, thinking of various outcomes and potential outcomes and how that might be positioned. You need to do your research. You need to look at, your horizon scans. What are the impacts in relation to issues? Where you need to move your business to those issues? How those external factors are going to impact on your internal business, but also your internal factors. So you've got to do a comprehensive analysis around the external and internal factors and actually understand how you can get a viable strategy that can be achieved. There's no point developing strategies that you haven't got internal resources to deliver, which presents some significant challenges. But personally, I use a range of different tools, whether it's SWOT analysis, TOES analysis, which is translating the SWOT into a strategic outcome, as well as a number of other capabilities and tools. So there's a plethora of tools out there. Think about the problem, think about the environment, think about your capabilities internally and how you can position that moving forward. How do you deal with classified and confidential data as it relates to foresight? This is challenging. We don't generally, in an international organisation, we don't generally deal with classified material. We'll deal with in-confidence material. And I mean, confidential data can extend to issues about, when we're working with a private-public partner, that, there's commercial in confidence data, there's data that, nice to have and need to have. In law enforcement, we do get police data, which I guess in some respects is in confidence. But it's always challenging around the foresight piece. A lot of data is classified, that my experience has been classified because of the source that cleans that data. So the information itself isn't an issue per se, it's just how it was collected. But in foresight, a lot of the foresight can be done by open source, looking through issues, looking back through crises of the past and understanding how the environment, and of course the environment's changed to where we are today, but what were the impacts and drivers for change back then, how that can be applied and correlated to our current environment and where the challenges might sit in relation to those types of issues. How does your interaction and coordinate on strategy and operation issues with the UN system and WHO? Look, we're very fortunate to have robust relationships with a lot of the international organisations. Historically, I guess a law enforcement styled focused organisation such as Interpol wouldn't normally have a relationship with the World Health Organization per se. Although we've seen that, we have been, we've had engagements with WHO during the COVID-19 crisis and provided some discussion and support around a number of different issues. From a UN perspective, we've got quite a solid working relationship with the United Nations, as well as other international organisations that are currently working through some of the challenges and issues. So it's always good to work through those processes. Our business model from Interpol is primarily that criminal investigations focus. So we have a niche, I guess, in some respects, but obviously that niche is also in demand in relation to some of the challenges that other organisations are facing, and we need to balance those requirements as part of our obligations to our 194 member countries. Hope that answers the question. What would be the opportunity and risks that could emerge from innovation, deployment of health and safety tracing tech post-pandemic? That's a good question. What would be the opportunities and risks that could emerge from innovation, deployment of health and safety tracing tech post? Look, I think COVID-19 is an interesting event, and it'll obviously be analysed and studied infinitum post the crisis. I think it will have an impact of change. We're seeing, some of the issues now in relation to, benefit of COVID-19. We're seeing a drop in, carbon emissions globally, as obviously as businesses and systems have been shut down or suspended operations for a while, which is having a positive effect on our environment. So that's one aspect. So, I mean, from that perspective, how will we change into the future is a good question from a health perspective and the safety perspective. And I guess the value of WHO and the classifications of pandemics and threats. From my personal perspective, and it hasn't been my focus, but from my personal perspective, I think there'll be a lot of learning out of this event. I think there'll be an opportunity for working through those challenges to get to come up with new systems, services and capabilities that will aid in potentially the prevention or diversion of a future style pandemic potentially. I think it's brought together a lot of capability globally in support of each other, and we're seeing some amazing collaborative efforts in relation to vaccine generation at the moment. So I think there'd be a positive benefit in the longer term for us globally as a collective to humanity. But again, that's something that's beyond my current operational remit, and I guess I probably haven't spent as much time as I should thinking about those activities. Going on to the next one. What kind of crime do you believe would exist in a scenario where universal base income has been implemented? Yeah, interesting. The human, we're an interesting species. We're individuals of our race, suffer from issues of greed and power and a range of different capabilities. Motivations for crime generally stem from issues around obviously wanting to get something that someone else has or taking something that someone else has. So this desire and this greed of individuals will impact on the broader community. The majority of the community are good people that will do a good turn for another, but there are elements across society that people will try to exploit and take advantage of situations for their own personal motivated reasons. So look, it's going to be a challenge. I think, if there is a depression, from a law enforcement perspective, the risks, I guess, are quite significant to community. Mass unemployment leads generally to a lot of people to reach a crisis point, and it's history shown that there's been a heightened risk of suicide and other types of obviously domestic violence and violent crimes through elements of challenging circumstances. We have a lot of people that will do what they can to survive, and at times that can present some challenges, obviously for law enforcement to obviously stem those issues, because sometimes you have to meet the need of the individual, and a lot of countries are really focused on trying to retain in workforce at the moment because of those social challenges that it presents, not having an active workforce that are obviously viable, and you're meeting those fundamental human needs from a community perspective. So these are big challenges. This is a global threat, I guess, to how we have lived, and I think, and it will change, I guess, certain aspects of how we collaborate and work together through those processes. But I don't think it's insurmountable. I think we're quite, most people are quite decent, as long as their basic needs are met. And I think that's the fundamental focus we need to achieve. What else? I've got these other things here, chats. Let's think about the challenges of, I guess, what organised crime's currently suffering from. And I think, and this might be due to some of the spikes we're seeing around the cyber environment. Generally, a lot of organised crime, historically has been involved in commodities or protection type processes. And the commodities, I think there's challenges for getting commodities to market at the moment. So how do they sort of obviously try to supplement their criminal activity through alternative means? And I guess, this could be linked to some of the cyber spikes and some of the activities that we're seeing around those challenges. I mean, the environment too presents broader challenges to organisations and individuals. A lot more people are working from home, obviously. They've got systems, some are using their own systems, others are using organisational systems. But working from home has additional vulnerabilities that opportunist criminals could take advantage of. Maintaining just virus scanning processes and keeping your systems up to a healthy standard is critical. And sometimes that presents some opportunities for criminals to exploit. So for us, it's a very dynamic environment. It's a very changing environment in relation to how people are currently working and interacting. From a policing perspective more broadly, the challenges are, in different countries, is that different countries have different levels of controls that have been put over the communities. In Singapore, for example, now we can't have guests or friends into our apartments, which, obviously that social interaction sort of drops away, except through the webcam, I guess, to a lot of extent. And so for us, it's, so from a criminal perspective, how can they exploit those opportunities? And it opens up opportunities for them to tailor messages through emails, discussions, and what's perceived as a positive initiative to lure people into a potential scam of some description. So look, I encourage all people to be conscious of the fact that there are people that will take advantage of this situation. There are people that will take advantage of people's current environments and some of their vulnerabilities that the current environment presents. We're social creatures. We want to be in touch. We want to contact with people. And so it's quite likely we'll see malware and phishing opportunities that will be tailored around some of the challenges that people are facing in the current environment at the moment as we go through this quarantine period before we come out the other end. So be wary, be open to the ideas that at times people don't always purport to be who they are in a way, and there are people out there that will take advantage of the situation. So just be confident, but be aware. So I think no need to panic. How are we going? We've got another Q&A. No, got that one. Well, blockchain is an interesting piece of discussion, and it's been quite an avid piece of discussion for quite some time. One of the things we have was we had a forum last year in Interpol where we talked about the blockchain, and we had a number of proponents of the blockchain saying it will revolutionise the internet in relation to reducing and mitigating all criminal activity across the internet, because everything gets put into the blockchain, the ledgers, and you can basically fundamentally track every interaction back through the blockchains if you put it across the internet, which is interesting. I guess from a law enforcement perspective, I guess from my perspective, having been in law enforcement, and one of the big challenges we have is to try to prevent crime from actually occurring. And the blockchain presents some challenges around law enforcement's ability to be able to identify a potential threat through processes and factors and potentially disrupt the threat. You know, the argument I had with one quite knowledgeable, and his position was that we should put the blockchain across the internet as part of that communication process. Was that oh well, you'll know who's done it once the bomb's gone off, and that's just the scenario. And I think the issue is, you know, our big focus from a law enforcement perspective is actually to reduce the harm that it has on other people. And obviously, if that we don't want that bomb to go off. So, you know, like the blockchain obviously is being quite successful around the issues of cryptocurrency at the moment. But, you know, the extension of the blockchain poses some pros and cons that need to be weighed up in relation to those. One thing I've always been a person that's, you know, from thinking through those challenges, if a man can create something, a man can break something. And I think as technology and advancements and capabilities, you know, advancing so rapidly at the moment, you know, there's going to be a point where we're going to get to, you know, that certain things are going to be manipulated and taken advantage of at some point in time as the technology expands. So it's a continual, a continuum of advancement and protection that we'll be running through. You know, that I think is going to be the challenge for, you know, our ancestors to come. But I mean, there's some of the thinkings around some of the blockchain issues that I've been working through of late. Anyway, I think that might be it. Anything else there, Manuel?
It seems there are no more questions. Yeah.
I've killed the discussion. Look, thanks very much, everyone. Short but sweet. Just getting the message out there. We're here to obviously help and try to do our bit. We're facing our own challenges around our future, and we're working through those challenges on a daily basis. And the future and foresight methods and strategies that I've learned throughout my life factor into a lot of the development of the strategies and the process that we are putting in place. I thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.